So first off, change making. I think this is a word that means a lot of different things to a lot of different people. You probably are coming into this session with that idea of what you think it is. Just so everyone's on the same page, this is where I think we're coming from. And this is an Ashoka definition. It's adapted from Ashoka's definition that changemaker is someone who is taking creative action to solve a social or environmental problem. In my view, this has a move towards equity and sustainability. And I think it's important to acknowledge that this workshop, this is not just about choosing a green job, like sustainability manager, ecologist, or even a job in EDI. Organizations of all types are under pressure to change, and all work has an environmental and social impact. So this is about growing your awareness of what that is and thinking carefully about what kind of role you want to play. Many of you are already change makers and you have tremendous expertise in this space. This workshop is specifically to help you explore your future career through the lens of change making and share some approaches and ecosystems, resources to support you as you build your career. Now I want to pause here and hear from you in the chat. So I'd love to hear, what are some of the issues that you care about? Perhaps these are issues that you're already working on, or maybe they're things that you want to work on in the future. So drop those in the chat and we just want to see what you're interested in. And while you do that, we're going to have Alice share her story.
Awesome, thank you. So for me, one of the issues I care deeply about is environmental rights. What got me interested in environmental rights is the interconnection it has to human rights. My family's Brazilian, and the Amazonian rainforest is a huge part of our culture. But the growth and environmental destruction to the Amazon, there's a large loss of biodiversity, as well as human rights for Indigenous peoples, inhabitants of nearby communities, and our entire world. Something I'm currently doing is getting involved in my local community's efforts to protect the environment. For example, I joined the City of Coquitlam's Park Spark program to keep our local rainforest safe from issues. I also got involved on campus by joining Student Energy Club. Now I volunteer with a group of amazing individuals dedicated to improving sustainable energy usage around the world. I look forward to continuing to explore my areas of interest in environmental conservation and sustainable energy through my future career as a changemaker.
Thanks, Alice. And I see lots of good stuff in the chat. So mental health awareness, normalization, wildlife and environmental conservation, flooding, health equity, and helping refugees. So much good stuff there. So this workshop is a bit of a pilot project. You might have never been to a career workshop centered around change making. So I want to share a bit about what I was hearing from students, and we'll see if you can relate at all. So as a career educator, I work with hundreds of students each year in every faculty, from first semester straight through to postdocs. And many questions are actually the same. Give me a thumbs up if any of these resonate. So these are all things that I've heard. I'm worried about what I'm going to do with my degree. What if I can't find a job or a good job? I've been feeling more anxious lately with the state of the world. I don't know if one person can make much of a difference. I want to make a positive impact. I'm just not sure what that is. In my classes, I learn a lot about issues, but not as much about what are the solutions. And I have experience volunteering and studying about issues I care about, but I haven't really thought how these could translate into my future career. So feel free to drop a thumbs up or drop a note in the comments if you've experienced anything like this. So I think what actually sparks this workshop is a growing interest for me around social innovation. Let me know, give a thumbs up if you've heard of social innovation. So at a basic level, it's a mindset plus a set of skills. It's the mindset that I have a role to play in shaping my and the world's future. And the set of skills are things such as design thinking, systems thinking, participatory processes. These are all embedded in this session, so you'll be activating social innovation skills as you're applying them to career, as you're building your career. And essentially, you'll be applying them to tackle the complex challenge of what should I do with this one wild and precious life, in Mary Oliver's words. So the way we'll do this together is by moving through a bit of a worksheet. It's something that we've created called the 10 career building strategies for changemakers. It's not steps because it's not linear. And this is one of those things where take what's helpful to you, leave the rest behind. But I think these are all strategies that can be really helpful in terms of building your career. So Ahmed will drop this in the chat right now. I'll ask you to save it and you can actually edit it right in the PDF. Some of these strategies are very short. We'll cover them within just a couple minutes, and some we're really deep dive because they're really critical to thinking about your future. I'll give you just a moment here to download your worksheets. And again, once you save them, that's when you can edit them. So some of you may be familiar with the concept of design thinking, which this workshop is based around. Design thinking is essentially a problem-solving approach using human-centered techniques, and it's used by some of the world's leading brands as well as folks working on complex problems. You'll have a chance to do many of these steps, including prototyping your future. So the first one of these 10 strategies is to identify your strengths. I really believe in a strengths-based approach. So this is where you'll have to open your fillable worksheet. And once you download and save it, you will be able to enter your strengths. And also just a note that when we get to slides with this gray design in the background and this worksheet icon, that is to signal you that you'll do something on your worksheet. So now, looking at your strengths and experiences from the past or the strengths that you use that you enjoy working on, what are some things that you might like to do in the future? What are some ways you might want to leverage your strengths? This I thought would be helpful to share, which is from a McKinsey survey of 18,000 people across 15 countries, and it identified skills projected to be in growing demand. So it may just kind of help you brainstorm what some key strengths are for you. What is interesting is that the skills the experts have identified as most important for the future work, many of those skills are actually aligned with change making, for example, entrepreneurship. So learning social innovation skills not only helps students enhance their change-making capacity, but it also helps them be more future ready. And again, this is by no means an exhaustive list. So the skills you would like to use may not be on here, and it doesn't mean they won't be in demand. I just wanted to give you some ideas. So now I'll give you a moment now just to pick perhaps 3 to 5 that you feel most inspired to build moving forward. I would also share that there might be a strength on here that you feel inspired to use, even if you don't have a lot of experience in it yet. So it could be computer programming or data analysis. What do you feel like you do that time just flies when you're working on it, or that you have an emerging interest around? So again, this worksheet is to guide you through some different ideas. You can always pause if you're rewatching this or come back to this and work on it further. For now, we'll move on. So this is where, in your worksheet, you've actually created the first part of your mission statement, which is identifying what strengths or experiences you want to build on. And this is really important, this mission statement, because it's hard to get anywhere if you don't know what you're aiming at. It doesn't mean it can't change, but it points you toward your next direction. So we'll continue on with the other 2 parts of your mission statement after a few activities to help you develop it. And this will actually be really important. This is your why, and it is what will give you fuel in your career. So we're going to do an activity in about 5 minutes, but first I want to go through a piece on 2 important myths around careers. The first, one of these is that career plans are essential to success. So this is something that was really debunked by a Stats Canada research where they asked 25-year-olds how many are still pursuing the same career they thought they would be when they were 17? What are your thoughts on that? So what they found is it's actually very few. So if you have a group of 6 friends, only one of you will end up doing what you thought. So 1 in 6 25-year-olds are still pursuing the same career or have the same career ideas that they thought when they were 17. It's clear that exposure to new ideas, new information about yourself and about the world around you will change the career ideas. And this is to be expected. So if you're a little bit uncertain right now about where you're going, this is perfectly normal. So I want to show you something right now, which is a really cool tool to explore your different careers and through this lens and just show you how wide open things are. So Ahmed, I'll ask you to drop the link in the chat if you would. This is the Stats Canada research that I had spoken about. So what they did was take a look at what students studied and what their occupations were now. This is specifically university students. So let's take a look at math. Math, you would think people who study math maybe end up doing math. But what's interesting is, 41% actually work in computer and information systems. 2% actually become mathematicians, statisticians, and actuaries. Now, I'm not a mathematician, but I know that that's a lot that are working in a wide range of other different fields. So let's take a look at another popular major, arts, communications. So really, you can see it's all across the board. 31% work in art, culture, recreation, sport, but really there are arts and communications folks in a wide range of sectors here. So again, the link is in the chat. You can take a look and see how that relates to your own major. But I think it's an interesting idea that, you don't have to get too tied into, you don't have to get too tied into your major and specific options that you can do for your major. There's so much more out there for you. And really, every occupational area draws people from a variety of degree areas. So we'll return to our 10 steps after one more myth, which is bootstrap theory. Given that you folks are the change leaders of tomorrow, I think it's important to explore leadership and careers through an anti-oppression lens. Bootstrap theory is the idea that the individual is responsible at all times for your success. It's deeply embedded in our culture, this individual notion of success, the idea that individuals pull themselves up by their bootstraps. They pull themselves up to a better place through their own personal initiative. So in short, getting ahead is attributed primarily to one's hard work. And not getting ahead, well, that may be linked to laziness. What this doesn't consider is that careers are personal, but they're also systemic. And not everyone has the same opportunity structures. Although we construct our identities to some extent, society does too. And I think this is so often overlooked in the career field. It always comes down to what you should be doing as an individual to get ahead, to be competitive, etc. So the way that this plays out is through these different systems. So we live in systems that affect us each in different ways. It's a lot of the isms: racism, ableism, sexism. This is a map of intersectionality, which shows how different forms of discrimination can overlap and intersect. Perhaps in looking at this, it brings to mind ways you may have been advantaged or disadvantaged in the past. For myself, I'm biracial, and there are ways both sides of my identities have disadvantaged and advantaged me. So how many different factors of your identity, whether kind of they're visible, perhaps like race, or maybe invisible, like mental health, how many of these have impacted the opportunities available to you and how much you can lead and in which spaces? So it's the idea that the longer you swim in a culture, the more invisible it becomes. It's the water we're swimming in. And privilege is thinking something is not a problem because it's not a problem for you personally. So some folks grew up with an understanding of the systems that they were up against, and some have only recently begun to learn about them. Where does this leave us? So many of us know that we need to be working towards a more just and sustainable world. This bell hooks quote, I think, is one of the most powerful reminders when it comes to change making. Sometimes people try to destroy you precisely because they recognize your power, not because they don't see it and don't want it, not because they see it and don't want, sometimes people try to destroy you precisely because they recognize your power, not because they don't see it, but because they see it and don't want it to exist. So it can be easy to think you don't have power to change things. And that's something I was hearing from students in my office. You might be early in your careers and not always in those formal positions of authority yet, but you have more power than you realize. And let me explain why. What I think is not often discussed is that there are actually different forms of power, and this framework can be so helpful for seeing that. So power over is essentially the idea that power is finite, that it needs to be protected. This is kind of hierarchy and exerting power over others. Sometimes through scare tactics, or sometimes through blaming other marginalized groups. Whereas there are many other forms of power. So power to, power within, and power with. This is the idea that power is actually shared and expansive. There's lots of power to go around. It's the idea of servant leadership, that leadership comes from a place of serving others as opposed to being served by others. And this is an important route, I believe, to social change, because it's about empowering and working with others, and also recognizing the power that you have both as an individual, but also with others, and also to empower others. So careers, again, they tend to be something that people try to build their careers by themselves. Perhaps it's the bootstrap mentality. Not only that, but when you think of some of the big challenges in the world, like the students that I was seeing in my office, it can feel really overwhelming when you think just about your own impact. So this is a bit of an invitation of what might power with look like for you moving forward. And as you look to build alternative futures, what are some ways you might work collectively towards systems change? Also, for some anti-oppression resources to dive deeper into this, these are some links. And I know, again, there's this wealth of knowledge in this group here. So feel free to share in the chat any resources you found particularly helpful. So on to strategy 2. Get clear on what matters to you. So I believe those concepts we covered are important for any changemaker career. The next 2 sections are linked. And again, this section is all about get clear on what matters to you. And number 3, identify real world challenges. They're so closely linked that I'll cover them together. I really appreciate this quote by former Google Global Education Evangelist, Jamie Cassep, who says, "Don't ask kids what they want to be when they grow up. Ask them what problems they want to solve and what they need to learn to be able to do that." This is an important reframe. And this is all about activating that entrepreneurial mindset. So for this activity, we'll actually use a digital tool called the challenge cards. And it lets you select what challenges you would most like to work on and to kind of reflect on this. I would say this is a general career tool, so not all of these relate to green jobs or social impact work. But what we're doing here, what's more important is developing a challenge mindset, which is ideally a new way of thinking about your future career. So I'll do a quick demo. So essentially, once you log in, this is what the tool will look like for you. And you will choose, you'll see different challenges here, and you will choose either not interested, interested, or very interested. So you'll go through and select how interested you are in these different challenges. Once you're done that, you'll be asked to pick your top 3 challenges. So I may be picking create new food and food systems, engineer better medicine, and foster understanding and respect. So I will, on this next slide here, I will just show you how to log into that tool. We'll give you also about 7 minutes to do this independently. And again, just trust your instincts and don't get stuck on job titles. So here is the login information, and Ahmed will also drop it in the chat. So if you go to this link, mysparkpath.com, and click sign up, then you can create a student account with this code SFU. It doesn't matter if you're from UVic or UBC, just go ahead and use this code. And feel free to give us a thumbs up if you were able to do that. And drop any questions in the chat if you're having any challenges with that, and our team can support you. Yeah, just go to this link, click sign up, make sure it's student account, and then enter SFU. SFU needs to be all lowercase. Thanks, Ahmed, for putting it in the chat.
Of course.
So we'll give you about 6 minutes to just go through and pick your top 3 cards. I also wanted to offer an alternative. There might be folks who have done the challenge cards before, or maybe would prefer a different type of reflective activity. So, or maybe they'll finish early and want something else. So I'm going to leave up this slide as well, which is some reflective questions that you can just journal about. One way to approach this might be just free write for 1 minute for each prompt, or just write whatever comes up for you in these different questions. Okay, so for the most part, I'll be quiet for about 5 minutes so that you can just focus on that. As you're going through the challenge cards, you'll note that if you don't know what something is, there's a little I for more information. That can be helpful, but also don't worry too much about and analyzing each one. What's most important is what you think that change is, or that challenge, and what you, how you envision it. I'll give you about 3 more minutes. We'll give you about 1 more minute. And again, if you don't quite finish up, that's okay. You can always just finish up as we're kind of going on to the next thing, or you can take your time with this at another time. And if you happen to be on the other side where you're done early, then feel free to take a look at these questions and just jot down some ideas here. So as you did that activity, you may have noticed at the end, it gives you the option to download a challenge profile. That can be another great tool to just help you kind of work through your challenge space and really understand where some opportunities might be for you in the future. So it encourages you to work through things like who is working on these challenges, what organizations, what are possible roles, how are they working on them, to give you maybe some inspiration for how you could work on these challenges, what kind of occupations you could pursue, people to speak with, and what kind of education or what kind of skills gaps do you have? And we're going to talk a little bit later about how to use tools like LinkedIn that you can actually get real world insights into that. So, love to bring it back to the group now. What is the challenge that you chose? You can just pick one if you like. Just quickly, if you're willing, share one challenge that came up for you that you selected. Thanks, Parisa. So redesigning the healthcare system, somebody else had that as well. Invent new biotechnology, promote healthy living, create meaningful experiences, making people feel better. sustainable energy, protect biodiversity and landscape, improve mental health. Great. Help teams achieve. Thanks. So in a way, it's actually nice to see other people's challenges, because sometimes it can feel like you're stuck in your own head and you're just watching the news and seeing all of these massive problems and challenges in the world, and it can feel overwhelming. But knowing that there are challenges that you can focus on, and also there are other challenges that other folks are focusing on. So knowing that this idea that more people doing more good in different spaces, there are just so many ways that people are working on these challenges and want to work on them. So now we're going to take these ideas a step further. The next activity has been adapted from something taught at a course in Stanford called Designing Your Life. So for anyone attempting to challenge systems, it's important to tap into your ability to imagine and reimagine different futures. And this, I believe, is an essential part of shifting what's been to what's possible. What I'd like you to do now is get 3 pieces of paper out and a pen or pencil. What we're going to do is design your own challenge cards. So as you're going through them, you may have thought, hey, something was missing, or maybe there was just no challenges that spoke to you. So this is your chance to right that wrong. There will be 3 challenge cards altogether, and each one will represent a future possible life or a vision that you have for your future. And it's going to be quite quick. The idea is to just tap into a different part of our brain and for about 60 seconds or 90 seconds. And it's really kind of like a free write or free draw activity. So there's no right or wrong answers. It's just really whatever comes to your mind first. Show you an example to put this into the real world view. So this is what a student had come up with for their 3 challenge cards. They came up with creating sustainable energy, policy in forestry or renewable energy for better management or resources, and food or restaurant blogger, trying out new sustainable restaurants. Okay, so over to you. Get your pens ready for the first one. And the first card is going to be a life or possibility, that thing that you plan to do or most want to do or are most curious about. So each one of your challenge cards will be different. This one will specifically speak to the question of that thing that you plan to do or most want to do. So if someone asks you, what are you going to do when you graduate? This is the thing that comes to mind. And I'll give you about a minute or 2 just to brainstorm around that. Again, you can draw, you can use bullet points. And if you really want to build out your vision, these are some great questions that can also help you. So we'll give you about 30 more seconds on this one before we move on. And the next one, life 2. So this is the thing that you do if thing 1 were suddenly gone. So if you picked a certain idea or challenge, try to see here if that thing was completely not a challenge in the future. What is it that you would work on instead? And again, I'll give you about a couple minutes to work through this. Try to really challenge yourself in this activity. So if you came in here knowing what you wanted to do, use this as some time to build out. Who is it that you want to help specifically? What are some skills or strengths you might like to use? What are future skills or knowledge that you want to develop? Maybe there are ways to kind of do that through your time at SFU to make your time here as effective as possible. What are some ways you can imagine contributing? What do you already know about this challenge? Who could you speak with to learn more? And what can you do to learn more? About 20 more seconds on this one. And on to the final one. You're almost done. So this is a fun one. It's that thing you do if you could do anything. So if you didn't have any constraints, perhaps, if your parents are wanting you to do a specific thing, maybe they don't care all of a sudden, or maybe you don't need to report into anyone. Maybe you don't care what others think. What is it that you would do if you were sort of free from all of those constraints? And again, this doesn't have to be the thing that pays the bills in this case. Just this one is just a little bit of fun. It's just a little bit of time for you to dream. Okay, so we're going to move on soon, but this is a great activity to return back to when you have a bit of mind space, maybe one evening. Just come back to this and start building out those challenge cards a little bit more. So how these relate as well to thinking about your future. Obviously, there could be some good stuff there in terms of inspiration. And with that life 3, that is actually a really good clue that whatever you put there, that's a sign that those things are important to you. So are there ways that you could integrate or embed them into what you do? So when we think about career, we think about it really holistically. So it's all your different life roles, the way that you're a volunteer, a caregiver, a community activist, all the different spaces you operate in. We can't always do, our dream job with our dream organization right out of the gate, but are there ways that you can kind of start playing with these different things available to you and the different spaces and opportunities that you pursue so that you can do them in a way that is fulfilling to you. So perhaps you do something for your paid work initially, but maybe if there's something that you really want to do for example, working in sustainability, eventually, can you find a student club where you can play a lead role in that? Can you find an organization that is trying to get its act together? So find ways to start doing the thing that you want to do. So hopefully that was a chance to kind of pause and quickly check in with yourself. And some of these things that are kind of swimming around in our heads. So from here, what I really want is to focus on what is most important. So getting clear on what matters to you. So think about what came up for you in these different activities. And on your worksheet under strategy 2, just jot down something about, what is it that you feel most inspired to work on next? So answering the question to create positive change in the areas of. So you already talked about your strengths. Now this is the area where you're actually going to use those strengths. And I'm going to pass it over to Alice.
Thank you so much. So you may have identified some real-world challenges that you want to work on through the challenge card, reflective questions, or the 3 possible lives activities. Another framework available to you is the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. A great way to learn about different issues that are getting tackled on a global scale is taking a look at these goals. In 2015, 193 countries partnered together to develop and achieve the SDGs. These goals were designed to foster a better and more sustainable future for all by addressing global challenges we are facing. On the next slide, we'll show you a close-up of what these goals are. As you can see, they relate to issues such as environmental, economic, and social aspects of society. However, the SDGs do have roots in colonialism. So you want to be really aware and conscious of what it is that you are wanting to use to engage with them. Some elements are missing, including relating to the specific history of Indigenous peoples and places in Canada. The SDGs are just part of the story. So groups such as Tamarick Institute have suggested that SDGs can be used in broader context with other roadmaps and resources, such as the Truth and Reconciliation Call to Action and the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. Next slide, please. When it comes to the specific area of careers that you're wanting to identify, it is important to identify future employers that might be working towards SDGs that you want to work with as well. Here's a snapshot of different sectors working towards the SDGs. You can see how opportunities to work on them are diverse. Next slide, please. Thank you. So now we'll finish off your mission statement. Look at your worksheet under strategy 3. This is part about the future you want to create. Write down 1 to 2 SDGs you most want to progress or your own vision for the future. Next slide, please. So this is an example of what your mission statement could look like. For my mission statement, I said I want to build upon my strengths and experiences of planning, organizing, and collaborating to create positive change in the areas of food security and poverty and help create a future where we're working towards zero hunger.
Thanks, Alice. So we'll give you just a moment now to just work on your mission statement and add in what is the future that you're working to help create. Right, so that brings us full circle to your mission statement. You can take a look at it now. It was steps, strategies 1, 2, and 3. You can look at it in the sum of its parts and see what it's telling you in terms of directions and how you want to use your gifts. So now we're going to move on to the real practical parts of how do we actually create opportunities for ourselves. All this mission statement stuff is great, but you're thinking, Jill, I have bills to pay and, jobs to get and all these things. So how do we actually operationalize these mission statements and connect in with where these things are happening in the world? Okay, so I'm going to cover now, how can I find organizations that are working on these challenges? A great resource to check out is the BC Council for International Cooperation, which is a map designed to find organizations that are working on areas related to the SDGs in Canada. For example, if you'd like to explore the area of gender equality, you can find organizations working on this in your area. West Coast Virtual Fair. So as you folks know, this is taking place and the platform actually opens on October 26th. So make sure that you are the first ones in there and you get the first choice of priority for what kind of employer sessions that you're booking or one-to-one conversations. What is a great feature this year is if you use the filter tool when you're searching organizations, you can actually search organizations based on what SDG that they are working on. So it's a great way to look at your mission statement, thinking about what is the area that you want to work on, and either use that filter or keyword search if you didn't just decided not to do an SDG, perhaps it's something else. So finding organizations that are specifically working on what you want to work on. I would also say the fair is a great place to be talking to these employers and learning more about how they are actually doing these things. Not only will that help you assess if they could be an actual good fit for you, but also the more organizations are called upon to share this with students, the more pressure that they'll have to make real transformative change. I have some other favorite strategies that I often find students don't know about, so I'll share them here. One is, this is a little bit of a Google search trick. So if you wanted to work on anti-racism, you just add to the search organizations Vancouver or whatever location you want to work in, and it'll usually bring up some pretty good stuff. For example, through this search, it brought up 16 organizations that were getting new funding around anti-racism. Well, obviously, new funding is good news for job creation. So linking in with where there's kind of momentum in these different areas. B Corps. So give a thumbs up if you've heard of B Corps. They are essentially internationally recognized certifications for social and environmental impact. And what's amazing at that is that there's a Canadian certified B Corp directory. So you can search for organizations working on these different areas. And there's also a great podcast to learn more about different businesses and how they're trying to kind of reimagine the role of business in the world. So kind of answering the idea of what would it look like if companies were built not simply to maximize profits, but to make a truly positive impact on issues that matter to our collective future. BC 211, so this is a resource to explore different nonprofits in these specific areas. So really easy way to map to organizations. So you could look for example, homelessness in New Westminster, and you could find organizations who could either be good potential future employers or who you could connect with about possibly volunteering with. And finally, my favorite, tools like LinkedIn are a great way to hop in a time machine and see what kinds of things you can do in the future with your degree. So I often hear from students, I created a LinkedIn profile, but I don't really use it. And this is a tool that a lot of students have found a lot of value in. It's the alumni tool, and it essentially lets you kind of Google search for all the different alumni from your institution. You can even filter it based on what they studied. So if you're looking for what did folks do with a psychology major, you can find that out. My favorite way to use it is to actually use the keyword search for different issues that students want to work on. So for example, mental health, and then add a skill or strength, so communication. And you can see that it brought up a whole range of different areas that you could possibly work in and people that are specifically working in that space. So you can go through their profiles and see how did they get to those awesome jobs. Another thing you can do is take a look at what steps they took to get there. So you can possibly reverse engineer what are the types of volunteer opportunities I need to do, what are the types of qualifications I may need to look at, etc. So a lot of this has been around how do you think about your future through this lens of change making. We're all going to face kind of these challenging questions as we're thinking about our future. And it's a great idea to start thinking about them now in the organizations that you're currently in. If you're in any student clubs, do you understand the social and environmental implications of your work? That's a really easy way to start being a change maker in your career. And then finally, continuing to learn, what are the skills that I need to learn to be able to do the type of work I want to do? And then thinking, as we're walking through these next steps, of how can I build those experiences? So the next few sections are really about helping you activate new social innovation skills and approaches to contribute to a more just and sustainable future. Step 4 is about asking how might we questions. So to articulate that, I like to quote Adrienne Marie Brown. She's an activist, writer, and facilitator. And she said, "A radical imagination is a tool for decolonization, for reclaiming our right to shape our lived reality." I'm really inspired by this quote because it's a radical imagination. So you can imagine differently from what the reality is. And this is about your mission statement coming to life. How might we questions? So what I want you to do now is take a look at your problem statement or your issue that you wanted to work on. And then add a how might we at the beginning to turn the challenge into an opportunity for creative solutions. So thinking about your area, for example, ending homelessness or whatever. This example is that there's a growing amount of textile waste in Vancouver. So that's hard to work from. You can get a bit stuck in that problem. So by turning it into how might we question, all of a sudden it's generative. There's possibility there for solutions. So I'll give you a moment to think about your problem space and think about how you can turn it into a how might we question on your worksheet. Feel free to share in the chat if you'd like. Okay. So hopefully that was a chance to just get started on it. And again, this is something that you can build on later. For now, we're going to move on to my favorite tool in thinking about change making, which is systems thinking. So how many folks are familiar with systems thinking or systems mapping? This is a tool that I think is so important to have in your toolkit for change making. Has anyone seen or created maps like this? So this is a systems map. And it's based on the idea that tackling global challenges starts with understanding a problem and its wider context. So this can help us make sense of the mess of complex problems and uncover ways to create change. This is a map I found online from some work done through SFU and partners around wicked health challenges. Get you to start creating your own systems map in a moment. But for now, I'll guide you through some ways and some questions that you can ask in terms of systems mapping. So it basically helps you get to what are the root causes of the issue? What are some bright spots where some good work is being done? Who can I speak with to learn more? Are there any places I can imagine contributing? What are the gaps? What are the leverage points where a small shift in one thing can create big changes in everything? So we're just going to do this for about 5 minutes. We'll get you to place your topic or challenge in the center of your page, and around it, jot down the elements that make up the system. So it could be anything that comes to mind, really. Groups of people, key issues, causes, and then just start to draw the connections and relationships between them. So for example, here's a cluster or brain dump map around the challenge of human trafficking. And so they identify different organizations, and this is almost like a stakeholder map of who is working in this space and what kind of work is currently being done. And then you can see the student really, when they had more time with it, then they could build it out. So over to you now, and this is the final kind of interactive activity that I'll have you do. And from here, in this workshop, it'll be more about sharing resources and tools. So one final activity will be to try and draw your own systems map. So just place your topic or challenge in the center of your page, and around it, jot down any elements that make up the system. So groups of people, key issues, causes, and then see if you can draw and label any of the connections. What are those points of intersection? I'll give just about 4 minutes to do this. Okay, we'll give you about 1 more minute just to finish that up. Again, today was just a starting point with systems mapping. I like trying to just get people to try it at the most basic level, just so that you know you can do it, and then you can always get more complicated with it later. But hopefully this is showing you that it's not something that has to be super challenging or super complex. That is, it sort of can start with just a simple mind map. Okay. So you may be interested to know that there's actually a global systems mapping competition that you can take part in called Map the System Contest if you really think you can see yourself doing more of this. This is team of Inferno, an SFU team that had the opportunity to travel to Oxford University in 2019, and they actually won the competition. They focused on the wildfire crisis in BC, and this slide shows a picture of a stakeholder map that they developed. Also UBC, you'll be happy to know a team from UBC won in 2021, and they explored urban Indigenous food insecurity in BC. Another team from Mount Royal University has won in the past researching the opioid epidemic in Canada. So from here, now that you've got your systems map, it's a lot about how do we take this area that you care about and start building towards those futures. For these sections, 6 to 10, it's a lot about, I'll just go through and share different resources, different ideas, And on your worksheet, you'll just note down anything that you think is helpful for you, for your career and your change that you want to make. So, and again, I think it's important to just remind everyone that when we're thinking about career, thinking about it through the lens of not just paid work, but also, the different volunteer opportunities and different ways, entrepreneurship, the different ways that you can work on some of these things. So good examples are Tegan, who actually was an Bachelor of Environment student. And when I first met her, she was sharing things like that she felt like she focused a lot on problems in her classes and was not covering as much about solutions. And honestly, she felt quite like, she said she was feeling quite upset about that she wished that there was more focus on solutions and that she could get more inspiration from what was already being done. So she started looking into spaces outside of university, and she created a blog called the Climate Hope Project. And this became a bit of a personal project where she interviewed people. She also was looking to alternative sources of reporting on climate issues and found all these amazing stories of hope of what people were already doing. And it's almost back to your systems map, thinking about where are those sparks of where good work is being done. So she actually ended up getting a lot of different contract work through the profile that she gained through this project. And it eventually led her to make a very seamless transition from university student to paid work in this field because she was already doing this type of communications and sustainability work. Raj is an amazing example too. So he's actually in the engineering field, but has worked on all sorts of spaces, including mental health. And he saw a gap where he didn't think that students were able to find really skill building volunteer opportunities where they could properly leverage their skills and do something, for example, gain experience in some of the areas they wanted, like HR or marketing or finance. So he also saw that a lot of nonprofit organizations needed people with these skills. So he essentially created a portal that connects groups. So for example, if there's a specific impact area that you want to work on or a skill you want to develop, you can go to this website, Meaningful Work, and look for current opportunities in these spaces. And another great resource is Ripple of Change, which actually is a project by Cicely Bell Blaine. And it was built to inspire social action by giving a voice to stories that need to be heard. So they essentially look at different places where there's good work being done in land activism, identity, health, and education. So it's a great source beyond maybe what you normally see in terms of where this work is being done, and even some great interviews with current change makers. So that brings us to step 7, which is centering equity and decolonizing practices within your work. So to clarify what we're talking about here, colonization, as you may know, is referring to settling among and establishing control over the indigenous people of an area, and generally with the aim of economic dominance. So decolonizing practices are around building the tools and language to question and push back on the status quo and make space for other ways of knowing and being. Likewise, equity is also about making a space for all people to thrive. And this is something that many of us are striving to do more of. I'll touch upon a couple ideas that can support in this. So when it comes to these topics, I look to folks who I see as leaders in doing this work. And one is Alexander Dirksen. So Alexander is this amazing community builder and member of Métis Nation BC. And he shares, when I think about decolonizing approaches to social innovation, I think it begins with recognizing where social innovation comes from, seeing how much of that actually comes from community knowledge and wisdom, really thinking critically about who we're centering in the work. So I think there it's, for example, looking beyond the classroom, looking to others beyond the usual suspects when we think about folks. I think it involves creating space for different worldviews and perspectives to come in, and with that, looking at how we do let go of our preconceived notions of what change work is. And in relation to equity, all the work you do in classes to understand issues, building your critical consciousness is key. And it's also about using these participatory processes that we spoke about in the social innovation skills as you design your project or intervention. So essentially, who is in the room? Who is missing from the room? Not only when you're doing your research, but when decisions are being made. I read a great book recently called Critical Hope by Dr. Carrie Grain, and she shared about how she, early in her career, she went to go teach in Africa and thought that she was doing a lot of great work. And what she actually found was that when she got there, that actually the local teachers were already doing great work and they already knew the needs of the students. And that actually she couldn't speak the language. So really it was the teachers who were already doing that great work and understood needs. So really where the problem gap is perhaps more funding so that those teachers that were already in those communities could expand their work. So it's not assuming that you know what a specific group needs, it's looking to those with lived experiences and designing with them. Number 8, build connections. So we spoke a few times about community, and I can't say enough about the importance of connecting, because part of that is when we're faced with a particular issue, we could feel overwhelmed, or when we're trying to build our career, it's hard. But how do we build connections? I think a really great framework is thinking about, instead of transaction-based networking, where you're trying to get something from someone, try to reframe it into more relationship-based networking. So, instead of thinking about it that, oh, there's something that you could offer them or feel like that you have to know to give you something, instead of that, thinking about, that this is a person who cares about and wants to make change on the same issues that you do. And that's a great start for a relationship. So thinking of ways that you can share resources and share ideas, whether in person or over LinkedIn, and building those relationships over time, as opposed to feeling like you have to have something to offer. And there's so many connections that I feel students aren't even aware of, but these are just some of them here. And a great strategy is to think not just about your first degree connection, which is the people you know, but it's also about who they know. And the second degree connection is where a lot of the magic happens. So now that you've identified an area of change, be sure to people can't help you if they don't know what you want to work on. So share it with people, share it with family and friends, and ask, do you know anyone who is working in this space? And you'll quite often be surprised at what comes up. There's some great tools out there to find and build new connections. One is the BC Impact Ecosystems Map, which lets you find organizations working on different problems. And finally, I want to share my favorite tool, which is LinkedIn and the ways that it can support you. So this is Hadil, who, when she first came to us, she had just graduated in political science. She did not have any job prospects and was feeling a bit lost. Through a bit of coaching, she actually started using LinkedIn a bit more and eventually did an information interview with somebody who is working in policy for the federal government. Through this information interview, she actually, what was supposed to be only a 15-minute initial conversation ended up turning into a 2-hour conversation. That ended, they both went their separate ways, but a week later, this person from the federal government came back and said, hey, I was really inspired by our conversation. I've actually created a job for you. So out of this simple reach out, you can just see this cascade of things happened. And that would have never happened if she didn't sort of bravely put herself out there. So this is something that I strongly suggest using, this tool called information interviews and LinkedIn. And do connect with your home-based career office, because this is definitely something that they can coach you with and make sure you do a great job of. Finally, so develop your skills and experiences. On top of building connections, we need to kind of build up our skills. So we're closing the skills gap and also building experiences. So we're showing people that we can do these things. Some great tools here are Get Out There Van, which is kind of a social media platform, which has a bunch of different opportunities. And again, I'll just take about 2 minutes to just show you my favorite tools. There is City Hive, which runs some really cool innovation labs around climate. They do some work with municipalities. The Radius Fellowship, although Radius is based out of SFU, this fellowship program is open to all students. So UVic, UBC students, you can also do this. And it's essentially a program that helps you create change in an area you want to create change in. There are some really cool models of different co-ops going on out there. So Solid State is through Surrey. And what they do is they build worker cooperatives. So this is by and for racialized communities, and it's about creating new economic relationships together. So it's a really unique model in that they are worker-owned enterprises. So instead of being owned by, shareholders, they are owned by the actual workers. And they have 17 cohorts, anything ranging from media production and urban planning consultancies to a Black-owned arts venue. Oxfam, if you are thinking about international work, there are a bunch of opportunities here. And a lot of folks don't know that you actually get, for the most part, you can get your internship paid for. So this could be a way to gain experience in different countries. RISE is also an opportunity for youth 18 to 30, and it lets them design a community-centered solution to a problem they care about. And Regeneration has career profiles that you can explore, and even a company transition kit. So if you're already working in an organization or student club or anything, it can help you lead change within your organization to make it more sustainable. And the Possibilists. So this is where you can connect into grant making. For example, if you're thinking of doing your own venture. So there are lots of resources specific for UVic students. I asked your career educators what they thought would be some really good starting points. These are really just the beginning, but connect in with your home base and they'll be able to help you out with a lot more different resources and tools. And again, we'll share these slides so you can take a look at them on your own time. So I like to say, dream big, but start small. So try to think about all the different strategies that you learned today. What is one action that you would like to take in moving forward? How are you going to make sure that this isn't a webinar that you watch one day and then you forget about? What is kind of one way to really quickly action something that you've learned and just get the momentum going and keep it going? So Favita, drop that in the chat. Yeah, and that map was the BC Impact Ecosystem map. So as you're doing that, I'll just share that there'll be a couple of resources that we'll share after this session. So the slide deck, and also we'll send you a career action toolkit, which has a lot more different resources. And some important dates to note. So again, make sure that you are an early bird when it comes to getting in the fair so you can get the sessions you want. So this Wednesday. And there's a bunch of other really amazing workshops coming up, like applying for grad school, network like a pro, and your well-being and job search, kind of covering and tapping into the mental health aspect of careers and job search. We also have a cool new program at SFU called the SFU Career Ready Changemaker program. Some of you folks may already be involved in it. And again, this is a good chance to earn a credential. You've already taken the first part in doing this workshop. So now it's just adding a couple more workshops to build that out and get credit on your co-curricular record and something cool that you can get on your resume. So the final strategy is connect into supports. There is a lot more support around climate change. For example, we have counselors who are building out specific workshops around climate change, anxiety, and grief. And also just general counselors, no matter what you're going through. I think we can't talk about job search and careers without talking about mental health. So let's just normalize that. And also, when you're thinking about social change and lived experience, just the idea that, we're not human, like we're human beings, not human doings. So just make sure that there are times when you're going to be able to make change, and there are times when the best thing you can do for yourself is take a rest and to regroup. So being aware of these supports on your journey can be helpful. And final encouragement to connect in with your career office. We are very friendly and not scary people. And as students, a lot of them say, oh, I wish I would have came to you my first year, or, oh, I wish I would have known about you sooner. So don't get lost along your way, just come see us. I hope these strategies were helpful for you. I hope this is really practical in terms of giving you some resources and ideas and different frameworks to think about your future. Maybe you hadn't thought too much in the past about change making in your career, but I hope that this is another lens that you can bring to it. And to really have a chance to make a difference in areas that you care about, and knowing that there is that power width that you can tap into. And I'll leave you with this quote by R.G. Lord. When I dare to be powerful, to use my strength in the service of my vision, then it becomes less and less important whether I am afraid. Oh, good, and we've got some great resources here that folks mentioned that they're going to do next. So not be shy with LinkedIn. Look at some of the portals, look at people working in your area. Think about connections. Awesome, all good stuff.